Okay, well today, as promised, I'm going to be taking a look at the full lineup for the Marvel Legends Villains Wave. I have the complete set here, so I'm going to be talking through each of them and giving them each a rating. There's 7 figures to get through, so I'm just going to dive in straight away with the a.i.m Scientist Supreme. So this is sort of the head honcho or the underling of MODOK or one of those characters that is above the ordinary grunts that we see. Now the first thing to note about this figure is that it has a really lovely metallic wash. The plastic is very shiny, it reflects light lovely, but it also has a solid feeling to it. So this does look and feel like a superior officer to the usual sort of beehive costume. And the figure has a really lovely texture to it as well. So the paint apps are fantastic and the texture of this figure is really nicely done. The articulation in the head is absolutely superb. It does not get better than this. I thought initially that the collar that he has might hinder some of that articulation, but no, it's really solid. He can look really good distance up, good distance down, and of course he can spin his head all the way around. Now, he does have the ball jointed shoulders, but you'll see that he can only get them up so far because what we have is those shoulder pads, they're hard plastic, and there is no movement past them whatsoever. And again, while he does have the double jointed elbows, he's got that big pad there. Again, that is a solid plastic piece and you're not going to get any more movement out of that. So that is as far as he can extend his arms, and yeah, that does hinder the articulation quite a bit there. Obviously he can spin his wrists and hinge his wrists in the usual way. He does have my favourite chest articulation, so you can get a lot of range of motion out of that and there's no hindrance to that whatsoever, which is fab. Not so much the waist though, there is no waist swivel. He does have the ball jointed hips, of course. Again, he can hinge his legs out. He's got the thigh swivel there as well, and of course the double jointed knees. So there's no hindrance to articulation in the legs whatsoever. And he does of course have the ankle pivot as well. And again, this is seamless and works really, really well. He's very light on accessories, but he does come with this blue data pad thing. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it looks futuristic, it looks sciencey, and that's good enough for me. It is a translucent plastic, so of course it does shine the light through quite nicely. And overall, this is a very, very nice figure. I'm going to give him 4 stars, and that's really to do with the limited articulation that he has. I love what he's got going on in the head. I love the look and the presentation of this figure. It's a really solid figure. It looks really nice, but you know there are some serious problems with the limited articulation when it comes to those solid plastic pieces. Next up we have Lady Deathstrike. This is a figure I was actually quite excited about because those of you who've seen my top 10 worst Marvel Legends figures, you'll know that the Toy Biz version of this figure was not great at all. So I'm really pleased that she's been given a second chance. So let's dive in. So first of all, I think this is a great sculpt and it really captures the likeness, the comic book likeness of Lady Deathstrike. And I think this is a real step up from the original release. The metal wiring and detail on the chest and in the hands is really nicely done but subtly applied. And you can see that the elongated hands, fingers with the sharp claws for the nails, you know, they are there, but they're not too exaggerated. They just seem spot on. So I love the detail in here, and I love that it doesn't dominate the whole figure. The articulation is also massively improved here, so she can spin her head right the way around if she wanted to. No problems there, and she's got a good ability to look up and down. It's not dramatic, but it's plentiful to give you that effect. Now I will point out that they give her a wind effect, so that her hair on one side is sort of always in the breeze, like it's blown to one side. In some ways I really love this. I think it's really nice, it gives it extra texturing and detailing and just, you know, creates more of a living feel for the character. On the other hand, I'm not sure that I'm always going to want it in that pose, in that kind of position, so I'm not sure how I feel about that one, to be honest. She has the ball jointed shoulders and she has the upper arm swivel as well. She's got single jointed elbows, but they can also swivel, which is nice, and she has the swivel at the wrist as well, so they rotate 360 degrees. And here we can see that arm being able to swivel at the elbow, which is great. So she can swivel at the waist as well, which is fantastic, but there is no ab crunch, so you can move her forwards and backwards a little bit there, but you'll notice that her soft plastic piece can pop out, and then you have to tuck it back in again. So that's a little bit of a failing of the figure, but at least it isn't a hard plastic, it is a soft plastic to allow you to you know, manipulate it a little bit, which is good. Of course she has those ball jointed hips, the legs do stretch out, and of course she's got the thigh swivel there, which is great, and the double jointed knees, as well as the ankle articulation there. So that's all good, and yeah, perfectly good range of motion. Okay, so for me, this is a 3-star figure. That might seem a little bit harsh, but I have a couple of reasons for this. First of all, I'm not keen about that waist articulation there. That worries me a little bit with the soft plastic popping out and having to push that back in. That's a bit frustrating. And I feel that one of the weaknesses of the figure is actually the plastics they've used for it. It does feel very rubbery and a bit weak in places, so it feels like you kind of wrestling against that soft plastic, which can sometimes be frustrating. So texturally, I'm not 100% on board with this figure. Plus, I think it would have been nice if they could have added a little bit of paint washes to her costume overall. Just, it is quite a dull costume when you think about the brown and the white, and it would have been nice if there'd been, say, some shading in there just to give it a bit more texture. So overall, this is a much improved effort than the last version we were given, but I still feel like there's a definitive version still out there waiting to happen. Next up, we have the hood. This is quite exciting because this is the first time, as far as I know, that this figure has been made or released, certainly in the 6-inch scale. So this is a first for this figure. So let's have a look at him. Okay, so the visual representation is really nicely done, nicely rendered. This is a nicely presented figure. I love that there's a little detailing on the cape, the rips and tears, and it's given the impression of having more texture than it actually does. So they've done really well with the cape. Obviously, this is a body that we've seen before that's been reused, but, they've done a nice job. If I had a criticism of it, I would say, well, two things. First of all, I'm not always keen on the open mouth because you're kind of limited to the amount of situations you can have him in. And two, maybe he's a little bit too colourful for this character. So I love colour in my toys, but I'm not sure if it's appropriate for this character. I think maybe darker colours probably feels more accurate. The cape is one piece and it's a soft plastic, and it just rests on his shoulders. It does not plug into his back at any point, which I'm not sure if it's a good or bad thing. Now, in terms of the articulation, this isn't going to come as any great surprise. He has the same head articulation there. He can move it all the way around. He can look up and down a good distance, which is great. He has the ball jointed shoulders, he's got the double jointed elbows, and he's got the same wrist articulation that spins round and hinges from side to side. So all good on the articulation front. He's got the waist swivel as well, and of course he also has an ab crunch. Thankfully his jacket is a soft plastic, so there's no hindrance to his movement, and as you can see he can look a good distance forwards and a little bit backwards as well, which is nice. Again, he's got the ball jointed hips, and he's got the upper thigh swivel as well, double jointed knees, and the foot articulation, the ankle pivot there. I always get a little bit hesitant whenever I see this with the heel where it separates from, because it tends to be difficult to move that foot forwards and backwards, I find. Now, as I said before, the cape obviously is one piece and it's not plugged into his back, but thankfully it's made in such a way that it actually supports the articulation. So although it's not a great look if you're opening his arms outwards, it can hold, it will stay on, which is great. And predominantly, of course, you're going to have his arms forwards, and it looks great like that, to be fair. He does come with 2 twin guns and blaster effects as well. So yeah, I think this is a really nice touch. I love that there's extra detailing in the firing of the bullets, which is really nice, and I think it's a really good effect. Now, again, it all depends how yours is packaged. One of mine looks great, the other one looks a little bit droopy. I'm not going to make any jokes about how that looks, I will leave that to your imagination. Okay, so overall, this is a 4-star figure for me. I think, there's a nice effort here. I love that it's the first time we've seen this character in figure form, which is fantastic. I love that there's been some effort made with the blast effects. I think they have perhaps mixed results. And I think that the cape is nicely done. I just wonder whether it could have been secured a bit better. And like I said, I'm not a big fan of the open mouth. I think it looks great in certain shots like this, but in others, if you take the cloak off, for example, he's going to look a little bit odd, a bit strange, a bit mad, really. So that kind of hinders the enjoyment because he's not quite as versatile as I would like. Plus, also, I'm not convinced by the colour scheme that we've got for the character. It looks a little bit too bright and too colourful for my liking. Okay, so now we come to Arcade. Again, this is something of a first. So as far as I'm aware, this is the first time we've seen this character in the 6-inch Marvel Legends scale, perhaps even ever. So this is very exciting and long overdue. So his overall presentation again is very strong. It's a nice looking figure in terms of the colour palette they've used. Obviously it's very simplistic, but it is again comic accurate, and I love that. I love particularly the green shirt and the big bright spotted bow tie. I think it looks really good, and I'm glad that they gave him his cane as well. He does come with an alternate head, and this is the long haired version. I have to say I'm not a big fan of this, but it's nice that they included it. Now in terms of articulation, again, no surprises here. This is exactly the same as all the others. Obviously his head does rotate all the way around. It's that ball jointed neck. And yeah, he can look a good distance up and down as well, which is great. He does have a moulded soft piece of rubber for his waistcoat, so there is no ab crunch, but he does have the waist swivel, which is good. He does of course have the ball jointed shoulders, the bicep swivel there, and the double jointed elbows, as well of course as the swivel wrist and the hinge on the wrist there. So again, no surprises here. He does have the ball jointed hips as well. So again, the legs kick out, they kick forwards and backwards, and there is the thigh swivel. Double jointed knees, and of course the ankle pivot as well, which is well done. So overall, not a lot to say about this figure really. It does the job, it's exactly what you think it's going to be. If I had a criticism of it though, I would say that I'm not a big fan of white plastic in toys. Generally when they use this, it does feel very rubbery, it does feel very difficult to manipulate the joints. It feels like there's a lot of resistance there, and there's always that nagging sense that something might tear or rip or fall off. And this figure is riddled with that, to be honest. I think it's really disappointing that he doesn't have the ab crunch there. Unless he does, then I just can't see it, and I'm not getting the most out of it because of that rubber jacket that he's got. So, you know, visually he looks really good. A little bland, but that is the design of the character, not Hasbro's fault at all. But overall, it does lead to something that's a bit more of a dull kind of figure, and I think given some of the issues I've just mentioned, it does impact on the rating I give this figure. So for me, this is another 3-star. Next up, we have the Red Skull. So this, of course, is not the Red Skull's first appearance in the Marvel Legends line. He's had many outings before. I've always felt disappointed by every Red Skull we've had in the past. There's always been something lacking or wrong or missing with each figure release. So I've held out hope that this would be the one. Straight away, this is the Red Skull's appearance as he appeared in those early comic books. This is a fantastic rendition of the character. I love to give him the armband with Hydra symbol on it. And yeah, the visual look of this character is spot on. Like, this is a fantastic looking figure. I really, really love this. His articulation is also greatly improved on figures that we've seen in the past. So again, it is the same articulation as all the other figures in this wave, as is pretty much standard for Hasbro's Marvel Legends these days. But we can see here, of course, that his head does rotate all the way around. It looks up and down. His waist moves from side to side, which is fantastic. He's got the ball-jointed shoulders, the bicep swivel, the double-jointed elbows, and, of course, the wrist swivel as well, and the hinge there. All fantastic. He does have the ab crunch as well, which is brilliant. So he's got a great range of motion down and up. Fab. And the ball jointed hips, so of course they swing out, they kick forwards, backwards, and there is the thigh swivel, as well as the double jointed knees, the boot articulation as well. So he has a swivel at the calf, which is great, and he also has the ankle pivot as well, so that the foot can move side to side and up and down. So fantastic, brilliant articulation on this figure. But the good news doesn't end there, because he also comes with a ton of accessories. So he has lots of interchangeable different hands. He has an extra head, as we can see here. But he also comes with a Hydra weapon and the Cosmic Cube. And on that note, I just want to point out how brilliantly he holds both of these. You can see there how snugly that gun fits into his hand, and his trigger finger is on the trigger. The Cosmic Cube fits perfectly within his grasp, and it looks like he's properly grasping it. The moulding on these hands is a soft rubber, and there's, like I said, there's so many extra pairs that he comes with that this is perfect. Like, I really, really love what they've done with this. So with that said, it's probably no surprise that this is a 5-star figure for me. I can't imagine what more you could ask from a figure, and I am pleased to say that finally I have a Red Skull figure in my collection that I think is is definitive. This feels really authentic. It feels like the character come to life, and yeah, there's a lot of versatility within it, thanks to his extra hands, thanks to his accessories, extra head. Yeah, this you don't need another Red Skull after you've got this. Next up, we have Dormammu. Again, this is another exciting release because this is only the second time that I'm aware of us being given a Dormammu figure in the Marvel Legends range. The first time, of course, was a builder figure, and it was very much based on a more modern interpretation of the character. So this is absolutely fantastic to see classic Dormammu brought to life in the 6-inch scale. So, of course, the first thing to mention is his overall look. Like I said, this is based on his classic design, and this looks fantastic. I think, again, it looks really authentic to the source material, which is wonderful. And, you know, I think they've done a really great job. I love that they've gone for the flame effect head there, and they've actually used that translucent plastic, so that looks really strong. And I think that's really nicely done. Now, you will notice that he has a black frame around his face, and that plugs into his chin, but there's also a support from this elastic band that's been put around his head to keep that in place. Now, in theory, you should be able to remove that and should stay on, but I've opted to keep mine in place there because I'm not confident that the little peg hole where the base sits will actually keep it together. Now, his shoulder pads, for lack of a better word, are made of a soft rubber, which is fantastic, so again, does not hinder articulation, very malleable, which is great. When it comes to the head articulation, again, he can spin his head from side to side with no problems whatsoever. As I said, there are issues around that black headpiece there, which is a bit tricky. Like I said, I'm not entirely confident that if I remove the plastic, it would stay up. But thankfully, there is no hindrance there from the collar, which is great, and he is limited in terms of moving his head up and down, which is a shame. He does have, of course, the same ball-jointed shoulders, the bicep swivel, the double jointed elbows, and of course the wrist articulation that we've seen in the other figures previously. He swivels at the waist, of course, and he does have the ab crunch as well, just as we've seen with the Red Skull, so that's spot on. He's got the same hinged hips, and of course the thigh swivel, the double jointed knees, which is fantastic, and of course he has the boot articulation there as well, the calf, so that can spin, which is very nice, and he does of course have the ankle pivot there as well. So overall, very, very solid articulation. But as I would say with all of these figures, there's definitely some resistance when it comes to moving the foot all the way back there, so something to watch out for. Now, he does come with extra pair of hands, some for summoning different spells, which is fantastic, and he also has these flame effects as well that he can wrap around his wrists or his legs or whatever you want to do with them, and these are very, very soft, malleable plastic sort of rubber, which is brilliant, and yeah, really enhances the effect of the figure, which is great. Okay, so for me, I'm going to give this one a 4-star. I really love this figure. It is basically the same mould as we've seen with the Red Skull, which is, you know, a very, very good body to use. But I think the only thing that really loses a star on this figure for me is that headpiece there. I don't like having the rubber band holding it in place. It is distracting, but at the same time, I do feel like it's not going to be held in securely. I think, you know, if they'd had a couple of pegs in the side of it that could have like slotted into his head, either side of his temple, that would have been great, but it sadly just goes exclusively through the chin, and I'm just not convinced it would stay in strong enough. But that might just be me. But overall, the visual appeal of this character is really nice. Like I said, it's very authentic. It's definitely true to the source material, which is wonderful. And I think, you know, in terms of the articulation, again, you couldn't ask for more, really. So, you know, it's a really strong figure. I think it's really good. I'm just not convinced by the headpiece. Last up, we have God Doom. This is, of course, how the character appears in Secret Wars, and this is the mantle he gives himself as God Doom. Of course, this is not the first time we've seen a Doctor Doom figure. We have seen many, many in the Marvel Legends line across the years, so let's have a look and see how he compares. So, of course, this is a faithful recreation of how he appears in the comics, so it is true to the source material, which is great. For me, I'm not overly impressed with this design, because it's very reminiscent of his Future Foundation appearance, and I actually thought, you know, when Marvel Legends did a figure of that, it was pretty solid. Now, the first thing to mention about the articulation is that he does have, you know, tremendous head articulation. He can spin it right the way around, he can look up and down, fantastic. But in order to achieve that, they've decided to make the headpiece, the hood, and the cloak two separate pieces. meaning the head and the neck has all the freedom to move up and down without being compromised by the soft plastic of the cape. But as two separate pieces, there is this unsightly gap where you can see his shoulders and the silver shining through. And to me, that doesn't look good. Now, I don't think this is comic book accurate, and it looks a little bit silly. Now, he does have, of course, the same ball-jointed shoulders there, so he can get his arms up a good distance there and outwards, which is great. He's got the bicep swivel, and he's got the double-jointed elbows as well. He does have articulation in the wrist, as usual. They can spin 360 degrees, and of course, they pivot left and right, which is great. Sadly, he doesn't have an ab crunch, but he does have a ball-jointed waist, so he can move from side to side, and he can move up and down a little bit in that range, which is great. He does have the same hinge hips as well, so he can kick his legs forwards and back to the side. He's got the double-jointed knees, and of course he's got the ankle pivots at the bottom of his feet there. So this is all very familiar, and this isn't something new with this Doctor Doom. This is something we've seen a few times. I really like his holster here. It's actually engraved with a D on it for Doom, which I think is really cool. And it is clipped in with the pin there, which is great. And you can slide his Luger out of it. Again, nice design. Shame there isn't more of a paint app on this. But yeah, otherwise, nicely done. It looks really good. And he holds it perfectly in his hand. Again, with his finger on the trigger. This looks really solid. Now, he does also come with extra hands. And of course, he comes with a spinal column with a skull attached. Now the skull has an articulated jaw, which is really cool, so you can close it, you can open it. I like that. I think that's really cool. I'm not quite sure what the context of this is, because it seems a bit grisly and a bit gruesome for a Marvel Legends toy, but a cool accessory to have. So my final verdict on this figure is he's a 3-star for me. There's nothing inherently wrong with this figure. There's no disastrous articulation or monstrous mess-ups with the design. I'm not overly fond of the two pieces of the cloak and the hood. I'm not convinced by that. Also, there's the feeling that this figure is a little bit dull, a little bit bland. Again, I can't really fault Hasbro for that, but maybe they've added a bit of a paint wash into the cloak or into the tunic a little bit more, just to give it a bit more detail, a bit more depth. The sculpt is lovely. They've done a fantastic job with the sculpt. You can definitely see all the armour and that, but it's a little bit too shiny, and like I said, ultimately there's a feeling of it being a little bit dull. We've had a lot of Doctor Doom figures in recent years, some excellent ones, and for me this one, it just doesn't wow. So a final word from me. All of these figures combined, with the exception of Doctor Doom, came with a Build-A-Figure piece to make up Xemnu. So I've done a separate video for the Build-A-Figure. If you're interested, please do go and check it out. I hope you enjoyed the vid. If you did, please do give it a like. And remember to subscribe, as I'll be posting more videos soon.